Okay, to start this one off, you're going to need to know your even and odd identities, specifically that the sign is odd and the cosine is even. So sine of negative theta is equal to negative sine theta, and cosine of negative theta is equal to cosine theta. The other identity you're going to need to know is your cofunction identity, which is the cosine of pi over 2 minus theta is equal to sine of theta. So this question is set up so that you can simplify this and then make a conclusion about this guy. Sometimes you have to simplify them separately, but this one's kind of tricky because you'll notice that the theta and the pi over 2 are switched. So we're going to address that by factoring out a negative 1 from that expression to switch the terms so that it looks something more like this guy. So cosine of, if we factor out a negative 1, that's going to switch these two terms, pi over 2 minus theta, because negative pi over 2 divided by negative 1 is positive pi over 2, and positive pi over 2 divided by negative 1 is negative theta. I meant theta there. So this is still equal to that negative 0.57. And because cosine is even, then the cosine of a negative anything is the same thing as the positive cosine of the same angle. So that means that that negative sign goes away. And this is your cofunction identity, and that can be rewritten as sine of theta. So we know that sine of theta is equal to negative 0.57. We are asked to evaluate the sine of negative theta. So sine of negative theta, because sine is odd, that's the opposite of sine of theta. Now, by substitution, we can replace the sine of theta with negative 0.57, which makes the overall answer positive 0.57. In general, problems that are set up this way are either going to be the positive value or the negative value. It's up to you to figure out, using your cofunction and your even and odd identities, whether your overall answer is going to be positive or negative. Alright, now for the second problem on that page that I've asked you to do, it's going to look like this. It's really the same idea. You're using your cofunction identity. You're also using your even and odd identity. So we're told that the sine of theta is equal to negative 0.87. This is already simplified. So now we've got to go from this guy. So the cosine of theta minus pi over 2. This is in the wrong order. So you have to factor out that negative 1 again. That's going to switch the order of those terms. And because cosine is now even, then the cosine of negative something is equal to the same thing as the cosine of the positive something. So I can rewrite that as cosine of theta over 2, or pi over 2 minus theta. And now, using my cofunction identities, I know that this is just equal to sine of theta, right? Now, sine of theta in our original problem is equal to that negative 0.87. So I know that this expression is now equal to negative 0.87. So those have the same value. Okay? The last problem on that page that I asked you to do was number 11. Okay, so number 11, you're going to have to employ the Pythagorean identity, which says that 1 plus tangent squared theta is equal to secant squared theta. And you're also going to have to use the reciprocal identity. So we need to find cotangent and tangent if we're given the secant, and we have to assume that the tangent is positive in this quadrant. So that being said, using the Pythagorean identity that connects these two things, 1 plus tangent squared theta is equal to secant squared theta. Replace the secant squared theta with this value. So 1 plus tangent squared theta is equal to negative 3/2 quantity squared. Okay? Square this value, and let's solve this algebraically for your tangent. That's 9/4. Tangent squared theta is equal to 5/4. Tangent theta is equal to the plus or minus of the square root of 5/4, but we know that tangent's supposed to be positive. So we only need to write the positive value of that radical. That's going to be the square root of 5 over 2, because the square root of 4 is 2. So now we know that the tangent of theta is equal to root 5 over 2. And since the cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent, then we can write that the cotangent theta is equal to 2 over root 5. And there's no need to rationalize that. Those are your answers. So this is what we're looking for. Okay?